me check over here first, real quick. Sure that we are also still streaming to YouTube. We are. Oh no. Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about the Netflix Hallmark Christmas movie cinematic universe through the lens of Hot Frosty. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we sometimes take a break from talking about video games, okay, to talk about, whatever, superhero movies. And I guess there's sort of superpowers, like magic involved in this one. It's maybe the closest I could come to.
Yeah.
The closest I could come to it. It wasn't even pitched as a cinematic universe thing, but I do think that it's a pretty funny way to put it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so Hot Frosty, for those of you that don't know, is a new movie that's on Netflix. That is, I don't know if it's officially Hallmark or if it's just kind of like Hallmark is like a genre designation, but they have a ton of these movies and they all reference each other. Like, so the example that I was thinking of earlier was that, like, you know how like on a TV screen in like a lot of Christmas movies you'll have what's it, A Beautiful Life or whatever. It's
It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life, yeah, because it's it's in the public domain. Well, Netflix owns all of these other movies, so they can just put them in the background of their other movies with no problem. So, like, I've watched a handful of these, and every time they play a movie in the background in the movie, it's one of their other Netflix movies. In this movie, I was telling Buddy earlier, the big moment is so the female lead of Hot Frosty is the same actress who played Gretchen Wieners in Mean Girls. And there's another movie that has Lindsay Lohan as the main actress. And that movie, which I have not seen, is plays in the background of this movie at one point. And Gretchen, the actress, looks at the screen and says, "That looks like a girl I went to high school with." You know, just kind of like casually referencing Mean Girls. They also, someone says, what do I look like the Queen of Aldovia, which is a reference to another one of these movies.
Yeah, which is called The Christmas Prince, which is that's when I started hearing about these because people thought The Christmas Prince was so funny. But like in a kind of cringy way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I've watched enough of these to know that most of them are not even funny in a cringy way, right?
Yeah.
I think Hot Frosty was funny in a cringy way, in like a batshit way. But for contrast, I also watched The Merry Gentleman, which is kind of like Hallmark Netflix Christmas movie does Magic Mike, and that was just kind of boring. It didn't have enough of a laugh for me to recommend that. But
Yep.
You know, so I don't think we're gonna sit here and go through like all 37 of these like we did with Fast and Furious. But
I kind of want to, but like also I would maybe hate myself. Partially because like there's a real part of me that actually thinks this stuff is kind of like interesting, but I don't know that I could do this for more than one movie. Because so for instance, I have a lot of thoughts about romance. I love romance. I love romance movies. I'm happy to talk about like what I like and dislike about romances, right? But like does that last more than one movie, right? And then also Christmas. I like Christmas movies, right? Christmas movies are sort of their own little genre. I I would say I don't think this is a Christmas movie. And we can kind of like talk a little bit about why. But like that is like can we get more than one episode out of any of this stuff? My instinct is no.
I would say
so
you might be able to, like, if we watched all of them and tried to bucket them, right? Because like I would agree with you that this movie isn't necessarily a Christmas movie, but I also don't think Frosty the Snowman, which is, part of the original, doesn't have to be a Christmas movie, right? Like there's not a lot that's directly about Christmas in Frosty the Snowman. Same thing in this one, other than like some ethereal thought about Christmas magic is what animates the snowman, which is like a normal snowman in the original and like a hot dude in this one.
Yeah, it's funny because I normally categorize Christmas movies quite narrowly. Like I would say I'm kind of a Christmas movie purist. I'm not a diehard as a Christmas movie guy. to me, you need more than just trappings, and also more than just kind of vague thematic content. This is another thing that people like. The argument for Die Hard being a Christmas movie is it is about reconciliation and family and stuff like. And it's like I think almost all of that is
Yeah,
kind of
no, I think
hogwash.
the argument for it being a Christmas movie is it takes place on Christmas and there are some like vague Christmas allusions. Like that's like the act.
Yeah, and it's kind of just like arguing the point because it's a fun argument to kind of
Yeah,
have to try and like, whatever, draw the solution to the maze by just like crossing all of the lines. It's
yeah.
kind of like
Well,
the thinking, or like,
it's a
taco is
categorization
a
game.
sandwich.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. I would
yeah,
say
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
taco
yeah.
is a sandwich, hot dog is a sandwich. Like you know, is boba a soup? Like that. Those kinds of questions, right? Like,
Yeah. So, like I said, I define Christmas movies quite narrowly, right? In my mind, you do need a certain amount of, I guess, what I would call Christmas world building, right? Any movie that features Santa Claus in a meaningful way is a Christmas movie, right? Even movies that feature Santa Claus in a mundane sort of way, like maybe like Miracle on 34th Street would be a close answer. Obviously, Miracle on 34th Street is kind of about the question of, is this guy in a rational sense Santa Claus, or is he like fucking crazy or whatever, right? But those questions are like Christmas kind of adjacent. Frosty the Snowman is pretty far down the line, I would say, towards the nature of Christmas. And outside of the very, very, very end of the movie, there really isn't much thought put towards the holiday kind of like itself. They give each other gifts in montage, but it's not even like it's not like they go there, they participate in a Christmas pageant, or like there's just any of the other kind of like Christmas trappings that you expect there. So my thinking is no, this does not qualify as a Christmas
see,
movie.
to me, I think it's just a little bit more holistic than that, which is kind of like, if enough people think it's a Christmas movie, it's a Christmas movie. And I think Die Hard can like slowly move into that space based on that. But like, just because it's such a meme. But I get what you're saying. I just, I I think if a TV station is willing to run it during like a Christmas movie block, then it's at some level a Christmas movie.
This
Like,
may be like the I can't define it, but I know it when I see it sort of
it's a
argument to it.
descriptivist argument, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, but I get where you're coming from, and like, I was actually thinking about this too, about like what songs enter the Christmas song canon, which like are is, but that's a whole other discussion. That's a discussion for the back half, I think, because I was
Sure.
thinking about this earlier, but
Okay, well, so and then the other piece of this, so okay, I guess we just have to explain the plot to people a
yeah,
little bit because we're sort of dancing around it. So, the movie is called Hot Frosty. It's not that deep. It is, what if Frosty the Snowman was hot? And honestly, he's not even that hot. That's the spoiler alert of this. The actor that got to play Hot Frosty is like chiseled and built in that kind of dehydrated, toned bodybuilder kind of way. But like, he's actually a pretty ugly guy in my estimation.
yeah. I mean, he is like a hallmark. It is like a something you could slap conventionally attractive on, right? Like, like you said, like maybe his face isn't quite there, but it's like, like I don't know, it's I don't think it's bad enough to like question the premise, right? But like that, but you are right. It is, it is.
I honestly just think it's so funny that they cast this fucking like horse face guy instead of, I don't know. I mean, maybe he's just the best they had on offer. These are not very high budget pictures.
Yeah,
Um
it's a lot of people that like, you go and look at their IMDb page. It's like they were either has-beens. Like the male lead of The Merry Gentleman is Chad Michael Murray, which my fiance reliably informs me is like a teen heartthrob for a lot of people.
yeah, the One Tree Hill guy.
Yeah. Um, or they're people that like had like 1,000-bit parts in the past, like the male owner of the used clothing store in this movie I looked up was like, he was like a secondary, like a tertiary character in some famous movie I had heard of, but like, a lot of people that are like, could be somebody, may like, you look at them like, do I recognize them? It's like, not really, but maybe, that kind of thing, right?
That happened to me with Dottie, the doctor. She's been just in a million of these things, and you can tell these are like paycheck actors, right? Who
Yeah.
are doing a bit part, and they do a million of these a year, and they kind of play the same, just real, like Margot Martindale kind of character actor people.
Yeah. Although this movie does have a little bit of talent, in that the sheriff is Craig Robinson, and the assistant sheriff is Joe Trulio, which totally threw me for a loop.
And that's who they put front and center too, for characters who are truly inconsequential in 90% of this movie. If you actually kind of map out how there is one kind of like real interaction that they have kind of like back in, kind of like back and forth, right? And then otherwise they're just sort of this bumbling buffoon B plot that is kind of not intersecting the main storyline all that much. Even if but like you don't know this on a story level, you know this on a trope level, that they are the antagonist who will end up being, part of the bad
Yeah, like
ending.
the third act. Well, there has to be a problem, so they're going to be the ones that cause the problem, right? Or like,
Yes,
Craig
exactly,
Robinson is
yeah.
going to be the one that causes the problem, right? Because Joe Trulio his character is clearly like, the good guy who's trying to keep the sheriff in check. Lou says, "I'm not sure how to feel about this being something you guys actually watched." I'll take the blame for that one. My fiance roped me into watching it, and so I had Buddy watch it, since it was a thing that he could watch before we had to go to air today.
Yeah, it's just because we couldn't do any of the other things that we were thinking about doing for today, and it just ended up being, oh, I could watch this while working. So
yeah, not able to do that with Gladiator 2, which is the other thing I watched this week.
Oh God, I want to watch Gladiator 2 so fucking bad. But whatever, we'll do that next week, or maybe the week after or something. Who cares?
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the level of romance, what do you think about this movie? Because this is interesting. I am a deep lover of romance. I love romantic movies, and some of my favorite movies are romances, right? So, for instance, my love of Titanic, right, which we've talked about. That's like kind of a recent one, but like and it's been in the background for a long time, but I've mentioned it a lot recently for some reason. Is like this is just because, yeah, fucking romance. A lot of fun. I love romances, right? But like, what are your thoughts on like romance as a genre?
As a genre, I don't know if I have deep thoughts about the whole genre. I mean, I've seen decent romances, I think, but it's not like like Pride and Prejudice, I guess, right? Like that's probably the most recent one I've watched.
You think of Pride and Prejudice as a like a decent romance? Is that like the different archetypal romance in your mind?
No, because like that's got a very specific flavor to it. It's just kind of like the most recent one I've seen that I would say is good, right? Like I think there's something that you're going to say is like these movies are like extremely shallow, right? Like there's not like I feel like a good romance needs like real kind of like character development, where like these movies just kind of like wave at it, right? It's kind of like they like, there is character development in that the main character ostensibly has a problem that needs to be worked through. But like they kind of work through it by just like having the plot advance and being like, actually, love is good. And, coming out the other side, right? Like, and that's the substance of it, right? Whereas like I think a good romance has more there, right? Like has like real kind of exploration.
So I absolutely agree with this. This is actually what I came here to it's actually kind of what I came here to say, right? Like the thing about romance in my mind is that at this point, most romance is nestled in other genres because it's actually kind of hard for romance to stand on its own, right? So just like some, whatever examples, for something like Twilight, right? You're nestling it in this power, like this political urban fantasy thing of secret fucking vampires. For Titanic, it's a disaster movie, right? There is the disaster, the ship is sinking, everybody's gonna fucking die or whatever, but they're also doing their Romeo and Juliet kind of, kind of thing. And this is also why so many action movies, superhero movies, they all have these romantic sort of subplots, right? Because romance can kind of latch on to other plot structures, like on other genres, quite easily. And I feel like in the modern era, that's kind of what we sort of see romances as kind of like being. And the thing that makes Hallmark movies so Hallmark is that they don't do that. They are essentially just a straight up, they're just a romance played entirely, entirely straight, basically. And there's a little bit of extra in, I would say, like maybe someone could kind of make the argument that like the there's a counter argument here that I just want to sort of acknowledge. I don't know how much I agree with this, but I think it is at least valid reasoning, right? Which is that romances are actually kind of subsumed by just comedies, and like the rom-com is just is the archetypal romance at this point. My argument would be a romance fused to the genre of comedy in order to create the rom-com, in the same way that a romance gets fused into Man of Steel for whatever superhero movie kind of thing. But I think romantic comedies themselves are the best counter argument you can make to the thing I just sort of like laid out. Like maybe you would say a romance at this point is just a rom-com, and the way that those work is how romance works in the modern world.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because I think the comedy is also a genre that falls prey to this, right? Like there's very few pure comedy, right? The closest, like a true, I think you would call them screwball comedies, or like the ones that are like the true like straight comedies, just like don't really exist so much anymore, right? At least in kind of like long format, right? Like everything's always tied to something else, right? Like I think most comedy in the recent years has had its wagon hitched to MCU movies, which is I think kind of this is the thing we complain about, but like this is where you're getting most of your kind of like comedy from, and so rom-coms are kind of like, it's two kind of latch on genres fusing together to make a whole genre. And so they're both probably like the purest expression of both of theirs in the modern era, which is.
And funnily enough, I would also say that, outside of a couple of examples that I could maybe think of, stuff like Pop Star, right? Like, that's a comedy, but it's a specific kind of comedy, satire, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or something like Superbad, American Pie, right? These kind of sex comedies, right? Like there are certain subgenres of comedy that kind of like stand on their own. But they are all kind of aping one another more so than they are coming home to sort of be their own kind of genre. And outside of something like Pop Star, Walk Hard, which I think are maybe good examples of this, but like something like Trainwreck, the Amy Schumer one, would be a pretty bad example of this, right? Like lots of comedies just become hard dramas in their third act, because it is hard to sustain plot momentum on raw comedy, right?
Well,
because
that's what happens in rom-coms, right? Is like, it drops the kind of comedy aspect for like the actual like heart-tugging aspects of the romance, with the exception of like the kind of meta. What, like, have you seen They Come Together? They came together. I think.
Yes, I love They Come Together. That's another great one of these like satires, right?
Right. Yeah.
That is so funny. I love that movie.
I think it's They Came Together actually, but yes, no, yeah, like, but like that's, but that is also working on it being a pair, like it. That movie does not work unless you've seen a rom-com and know what they're doing. The same way that Walk Hard kind of works because this biopic formula.
Yeah,
right?
You have seen a music biopic before. Yeah, that is absolutely true. Yeah, and this is part of why I love Pop Star so much, right? And not that I want to turn this into a little Pop Star episode, but I just want to explain. And you haven't seen it, right?
I have seen I saw Pop Star in theaters, but I haven't seen it since.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah. So the thing that makes Pop Star so good to me, the thing that makes it so transcendent, is that it walks this incredibly fine line that actually not a ton of these satires do, where it is satirical, but it's not entirely satirical. The friendship at the heart of Popstar Never Stop Never Stopping between Owen, Connor, and uh God, the fuck is the third guy's name? Kyle? Kid Contact? Whatever. I can't remember his name. Kid Brain is actually his name. Kid Contact is Owen. Um the the friendship between the three of those, that is taken perfectly seriously and could be in a character drama. Do you know what I mean? It could be in any like Oscar winning character. You could just one to one the plot beats essentially. But the thing that makes Popstar so great is that I simultaneously am invested in them as friends and wanting to watch Owen parent trap Connor and God, why do I keep wanting to call him Kyle? I don't think his name is Kyle. It's something else. But whatever. To like, Lawrence is his name. You want to parent trap, Lawrence and Connor to be friends again, right? But at the same time, it's just like drenched in all of these satirical bits that are happening, and all the songs are funny, and all of that other kind of stuff, right? Walk Hard, which is also amazing, doesn't even really do this, right? And most satires don't. Most satires are just front and center, no frills. They are just funny. Loads, everyone in them is essentially loads them. There's kind of really no extra point except it's funny to make fun of this kind of stuff, right? So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like there's a whole thing here too, because like I was thinking, like the spiritual prequel to Popstar is Hot Rod, and Hot Rod like maybe has a little bit serious you could point to in it, but it's like it's mostly just like I don't, what is the name for the movie that's kind of like, we need to hit the money goal or else the bad thing happens, right? Like,
yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of those, right?
Right, because
like a lot of movies come down to just a certain amount of money.
Yeah, I mean that's I mean, it is not set up as the stakes in this movie, but it is the stakes in The Merry Gentleman, right? Like
it is just it's the stakes in The Merry Gentleman too. Okay, that makes sense.
The female lead's parents own a nightclub in a small town, and unless they can make $30,000 by New Year's, the landlord is going to like sell it and turn it into like a Jamba Juice, right? Like and like, but like that's also what Hot Rod is, right? Like they need to make he needs to make the money so his dad can get a heart transplant, or his stepdad can get a heart transplant. That way he can beat him in a fight, right? Like it's what is in the Muppets movie from like 2016 or somewhere in 2016 to 2018.
The Jason Segel one, yeah.
Yeah. Like, they need to make...
because that one is we're putting on a show in order to make money and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
That is a super common trope, right? That's
to save the Muppet Theater, right? Like, yeah.
What would you call that? Maybe like a 42nd Street, I think is probably the first one of those. That's like in the 1940s, but maybe it's even earlier. Backstage musicals is what you call them on Broadway, right? A backstage musical is a musical about putting on a musical where the stage is the thing. I don't know. Maybe that term does that term translate to film? Maybe, I guess. I guess like High School Musical is the same thing. That's a kind of a backstage musical.
Yeah, but like it also, it's not always a musical, right? Like, Hot Rod, right? Like, it is, but it's make the money. Like, there is a whiff of that in this movie, which is just kind of like literally the final act, right? Like, but like the final minutes of the film, but it's
truly the final. And I want to explain. Listen, we're gonna spoiler alert. Okay, if you want to watch Hot Frosty, and I will say, I had a reasonably okay time because I thought the movie was kind of fucking wild, and we'll talk about some of that. I don't recommend Hot Frosty, but I also don't not recommend it. If your time is at a particularly low premium and you are just looking to spend it on whatever the fuck, I actually kind of could see myself recommending to watch Hot Frosty, especially with like a group of people who would all understand that the metaphysics of this world concern me to a degree that I just really have to talk about.
Yeah, no, like if you were looking to have fun watching a bad movie, this movie is good for that, right? Like, like if like I found myself as watching it wanting like Red Letter Media to go watch it so I could watch them talk about it, right? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah. It absolutely belongs on a best of the worst wheel, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. But anyway, continue. You were going to actually
Yeah. So
spoil it.
anyway, I was gonna say the stakes of the movie come down to $2,000 because the beginning, Frosty wakes up and is butt naked because he's a hot, sexy snowman. All he's wearing is a scarf. And a couple of people see him streak through town before he breaks into a store in order to get some clothes on, right? So he is wanted for, I guess, shoplifting. Maybe that's like some level of robbery, breaking and entering, right? Like
Streaking and shoplifting.
Yeah, and so the cop at the very end of the movie does in fact arrest Hot Frosty, okay, and bring Hot Frosty to jail. By the way, I do understand that his name is Jack in the movie, but I am going to call him Hot Frosty because it's funnier. And he's like, and I'm setting bail at $2,000, and you're like, really? I could pay that. I could just go to the ATM. You know, like maybe I couldn't go to one ATM. Maybe I couldn't take out $2,000 at an ATM. Maybe I'd have to like go to a teller. I could write a check for $2,000. Okay. And it would like, this is just not an insane amount of money, but it takes literally the whole town to come together in order to raise $2,000 to meet Hot Frosty's bail.
And this is the reason why it has to be in the final minutes of the movie, is the tension is that it is established that he doesn't do well in the warmth, right? Like he is like kind of sort of melting, and like he is literally going to die in the next 15 minutes if they don't get the $2,000 together, right? Like, you know, which I don't quite say out loud, but that's the implication, right? Like that he is going to sit in this jail cell and melt. Although he doesn't melt because this movie doesn't have enough budget for him to melt. He just kind of like dies, right? Like, you know, his lifeless body gets pulled out and thrown in the snow in a hope that he will come back to life, right? But like they need to do it now because there's not enough time to organize like a real coming together. But that's why it also has to be at the last minute, because if there's any time involved, right? Like if they know it's going to be $2,000, then there's a reasonable enough time to like go collect that money. It has to be an on the spot thing in order for the plot to work, which is part of why it's so nonsense.
Yeah. And also I want to say, you know, honestly, that actually makes me feel a little bit better about the movie, explaining it that way. I was thinking of the stakes as coming down to $2,000, but really there is some level of life or death stakes because he's going to get heat stroke and die, I guess, is the idea, being in 70-degree heat or whatever. But I remember thinking, we've actually been to, did this happen? Did I just miss this? We had been to the police station a couple of times. And I was like, why do they have the heat pumped so high? Is this like a character detail that I had just like missed? Because that would actually be a pretty great example of planting and payoff if they planted that, like, oh, you know, whatever, Chief Nathan really loves to have a warm police station, and then they take Frosty there.
They don't plant it. They do it in the moment. He asked them to turn down the heat, and he says, no, you're sweating because you're a criminal, and we're not gonna. You know, you would want me to turn it down, but like they could have done that in an earlier scene, but they didn't. They just do it in the moment, right? Yeah. Like, and they also don't like strongly establish the kind of limits on this, right? Like they you know,
this is what destroyed. This is like the metaphysics of it that bothered me so much. Like the world building is ridiculous, right?
Like he works at the middle school, and presumably he can go. Like, you know, they show him going outside, but it's not like, you know, we have no reason to believe that like the 15 minutes he's spending in this jail cell will be enough to kill him, except for the fact that the movie tells us that that's what's going to happen, right? Like, you know, all the environmental storytelling is like, you know, he can't be in there for too long, but like it's so nebulous. And like the other part of this too is that like he keeps the scarf on him because, like, you know, it is presumed that is what he needs to stay in a human form. But I guess they don't have the budget to, like, you know, do the scene where they like take it off and like show him turn back into a snowman and put it back on him or something, right? Like,
but there are moments where he's not wearing the scarf. This was also driving me wild.
It's on his belt, because I noticed the same thing. Like,
oh, it's on his belt. Okay,
they don't show it all the time, but they like at points they will draw back and you'll see it hanging off of his belt.
Okay, yeah, because I was like, if the defining feature of this guy is the magic scarf that brings him to life, how on earth can you have moments where he's not? But it is, those are essentially kind of close-ups, right? Chest up. So I just wouldn't have seen it on his belt. Okay, that
Yeah,
does
but
make
but
it a
it's
little
it's
bit better.
not good, right? Like I'm not excusing
Yeah.
the movie with this. I'm just kind of like I noticed that, and then when they pulled out, I saw that like he had it, so I was like, I guess that's what they're doing here, right? Like how they're like, but like you want that scene, you want the scene where like Gretchen's like, can you take the scarf off? And she like, and you know, her name's not Gretchen. I forget what her character's actual name. I'm gonna call her Gretchen because that's like, you know, what I recognize her as.
Is it? Oh man, what is her actual name? It's
Like,
like Jenna? No,
let's
it's something stupid. Kathy.
yes, I think you're right.
Yeah, I think it's Kathy.
Let's yeah, Kathy Barrett, correct. Yes.
Kathy. What?
Yeah. And you know, and they try and put her through an emotional arc, right? Like, you know, like her life is falling apart because she's a widower, but like they spend like 3 seconds on that, right? Like, you know, and then there's also the kind of like, this is the thing I was pissing off my fiance because the whole movie I was like, you know, Jack Snowman, Hot Frosty, has some level of understanding of things, but like also is like, you know, you can't just tell people you love them. Like he's a child, but like, you know, they're making out by the end of the movie, right? Like, you know, and like he is acting like he learns romance from the middle schoolers that he is like chaperoning the dance for, right? Like, you know,
Yep.
and so like this is a genre problem, right? But like it's like this is effectively a 3-week-old child at best, right? Like, you know, maybe, you know, like you said, the metaphysics don't make any sense because like he understands some things, he doesn't understand other things, and there's like
Yeah. So, for instance, she uses the term. This one kills me. Okay, because I think about this all the. She uses the term lay low, okay, which is an idiom, right? Okay, I understand this, right? This is not literal, it is metaphorical, and you understand it because it is in the common kind of like parlance, right? Or she says under the radar first, and he's like, radar? And then she's like, lay low, and then he starts laying down on the ground. He's just taking it like completely literally, right? So, this is the kind of thing that once you establish it, I am going to obsess about every time an idiom pops up in pops up in the script and it doesn't go acknowledged. And there are moments actually that are kind of good about it. So the one that I was thinking that impressed me is she had this thing that was like, follow me. And she got up and he got up to just follow her. You know, it's like what she meant was follow my lead. Right. But like he is actually physically kind of like following sort of behind her or whatever. But it was just like that kind of thing. There were a million other mistakes of just like how if he wouldn't understand this if he didn't if like why would he understand that if he didn't understand Layla? You know what I mean?
yeah, or like even the inciting incident of the movie, right? Like he spawns to life. He's like, you know, his scarf is very clearly like glued to his groin by costuming, but right, like, you know, like that's like, you know, the funny part, right? And
Yeah.
he throws it over his neck, presumably because he doesn't know any better. But then he sees the clothes store. He's like, "Oh, I need to put those on," right? Like he know, like,
Yeah.
like he clearly knows that he needs like, and then like the next morning he is like talking to the other snowmen about how like maybe they could come to life too, right? Like if it happened to me, it could happen to anyone. And like we're thinking way too hard about this, right? But
And
like,
also like he has like a sophisticated understanding of like ethics and laws because like the whole thing at the very end was essentially a lawful neutral thing, right? Where in the beginning it doesn't seem like he understands that bad has sort of happened, but then he kind of like takes a little bit of responsibility kind of just on his own for breaking into the, you know, and it is played for a completely different reason. This is why the metaphysics are crazy to me. It's like for a completely different plot point, they establish that he feels remorse for breaking the window and stealing the clothes, and so he went and bought a window for the shop that he broke, you know, that he broke into, which is just like, how did that happen? How'd you figure that out?
yeah, and not only this, but like even a sub joke inside of this is he clearly understands that things cost money, but he doesn't understand that like his host's credit card is in the computer, which is what got used to pay for it, right? Like it is baffling on all levels, right? But like again, that's the fun in the movie, right? It's like watching this nonsense unfold and be like, how did they make these decisions, right? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, one of the other ones that I thought was truly transcendent was everyone in the town immediately buys that he's a snowman who has come to life, except for Kathy. Which, like, I think they're using as contrast, because Kathy's whole thing is that she thinks he's crazy. She doesn't trust it. She's too hard working and down to earth, and she needs to learn to love herself again or whatever, which, like, okay, I get it. I understand romantic protagonists have a specific bent. Okay, I'm willing to give you a certain amount of leeway there, but it's just like the degree to which every other person in the town just immediately buys that he is a snowman who has come to life is ludicrous.
Especially like the doctor, who's the first person that she tells, right? She's
and she says, as a scientist, I can't explain it, therefore he's a snowman.
It's Christmas, I want to believe, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, but I think part of the undercurrent is like, the doctor and the old ladies are all like, I don't care, I want to ogle him and like, be, like, I want him to stay here at the hospital purely for professional reasons. Like, said exactly like that, right? To play the card, right? Also, apparently, he's got like, like superhero. What superhero has this power? Like Taskmaster level abilities to watch TV and like do home improvement.
Yeah, I just instantly learn. Oh man, I thought that shit was so funny. Yeah, like he makes a whole pizza. This was the thing that drove me nuts on the metaphysics level, right? Just after lay low, okay? He doesn't even understand lay low or under the radar, right? Like these, whatever. But he understands on a culinary level that if you don't have pepperoni, you can substitute ham for pepperoni on your pizza. And I was just like, how does he know that makes sense?
And he doesn't know until he turns it on that the oven is a thing that gets hot, right? Like,
yeah, yeah. And it's just like, yeah, that.
And again, so this is way too in the weeds, but like he like makes a pizza in the oven and it is the most beautiful fucking pizza I've ever seen, right? It's like I would kill to get fucking leopard spotting on the bottom of my pizza made in my home oven,
working feverishly. Okay, big like Squidward going away at the marble energy. Fucking the hot Frosty from the movie Hot Frosty walks up. Michelangelo's the David, but in pizza form.
Exactly, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
No, the funny thing is a similar thing happens in Married Gentlemen, which isn't Matt. It's like the main character's like, the Yule log that you used to make every year. It's like that doesn't make it anymore because no more customers are coming. But customers are coming in now because of the Married Gentlemen, and they like do for no reason at all. They do the short scene of them making the Yule log, and it's like this like not very good kind of like rolling up of the thing. And it's like I can't wait for. I looked at my friends and said I can't wait for them to cut and for it to be a perfect Yule log, and exactly that happens, right?
Yeah, yeah. I also love that he made a practice pizza and put it in the fridge and ate it cold because because of this stuff with his body, like with his body heat. If he had eaten a pizza, would he have melted?
Yeah, well, he said he burned his mouth and he just like stopped, right? Like so. Yeah.
There's a little thing where he keeps eating ice. He just like chugs ice. This was part of my thing about his like for the montages. There is no understanding, right, or kind of expectation that he can't be indoors at normal human conditions for extended amount of time, right? This is the implication that we get later on in the movie prom dance scene where she pulls him outside. She sees that the ice sculpture is melting in the dance, and then she pulls him outside because she's like, oh my god, he's melting probably, and I need to save him or whatever. But like by this point in the movie, he has spent all day fixing an old lady's house, and also he has a full-time job working at a middle school, and also they had frankly pretty funny quasi parody of the little not Little Women, what's the movie, Pretty Woman dress up thing, where she is dressing him up to be fancy for the dance. But it's like, did he have to go outside periodically in order to cool off because all of these places are too warm?
The middle school, they show him doing that a couple times, but like, yeah, like I guess that's the implication.
Yeah.
Lou in the chat says, "I need you both to recognize that you've had more to say about Hot Frosty than you
I
did about
actually
Venom
had
3."
this thought, to be honest with you, and I was like, wow, that's brutal, Venom 3. Get fucked. Okay. I will probably remember more details about Hot Frosty than I will about Venom 3, just because they were kind of baffling.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the thing, right? Like there is the absurdity that makes it fun to talk about, right? Like you said,
yeah.
If you find yourself with literally nothing better to do, just put on Merry Gentlemen in the background, and you will understand that like it is not enough. Like we would have as much, if not more, trouble talking about the Merry Gentlemen than we did about Venom 3, just because there's like not any of this there, right? Like there's like little bits, and like there's like the absurdity of like the of the premise, but like it's like that's it, right? Like, you know, there's nothing deeper there. Whereas here, there's like this there's this magical nonsense is what I'm going to call it, that sells it, right? Or at least makes it fun to watch. Yeah. I don't know how many of the rest of these are magical, right? Like, my fiance wants to watch it's like Christmas at the Biltmore War, which is a place that we've been to together in North Carolina.
It's the estate, right? Isn't that Vanderbilt?
Yeah, it's the Vanderbilt estate. Yeah. Very beautiful home. Apparently did fine with the hurricanes, or and it's open again. Although like some of these.
Oh yeah, because it's in Nashville, or not in Nashville.
Asheville,
right?
Yeah.
Right outside of Asheville.
Delph says, "Why don't we ever watch trouble romance movies together, buddy?"
We only watch good romance movies like Titanic together. Okay. And Pitch Perfect is another one. Pitch Perfect, which I famously love, which is also essentially a romance. I mean, it's kind of a musical. But like this is the thing that I ended up thinking about a lot, just on like a story sort of like level, is romance as a genre really eats itself in its purest form, which I think is pretty bad. And I think I know why. It's because you can't have really high stakes romance stories all that often, because high stakes kind of generate anxiety. We haven't watched Pitch Perfect together. You didn't watch Pitch Perfect when we did it for movie night? God, I fucking love that movie so much. We should do an episode on Pitch Perfect. Pitch Perfect has one of the best scripts I think I've ever seen in, like, it's like Brokeback Mountain, Pitch Perfect. Gladiator actually has a really good script. I read a bunch of these scripts when I was in college. But anyway, the thing with like not the Christmas Prince, fucking Hot Frosty, is the romance has to be low stakes, because otherwise you sort of generate anxiety in a like dedicated romance audience, if that makes sense. If the stakes are too high, you end up with one of these other, one of these other kind of genres in a way. And I think it actually turns off like a really hardcore sort of like romance audience, because what they want is the slice of life, essentially, right? Maybe I would even make the argument that Hot Frosty is actually a slice of life romance, which is to say that the stakes are super small, and it is about this like small town world that you can super easily project yourself onto, whatever Gretchen I want to say, but her name is Kathy.
Kathy.
Kathy, you like, right? Like, but the same thing also happens, I think, on sort of like the, kind of like the male version of this, right? Part of what men do in romances is they just like effortlessly project onto sort of cipher characters. Everybody complains about this with women, but I think it happens for both basically. um and that means that the main character is kind of dull and boring, which is absolutely true in sort of Hot Frosty. And she kind of can't have sort of like real problems or issues to overcome or solve in the way that a true protagonist would or can, because you have to make it as relatable as you possibly can, right? If you show somebody with like a real kind of self-destructive instinct or weakness, right, that immediately is what generates anxiety, which is kind of like opposite of romance. So I don't know, I kind of thought that was like interesting on sort of like a
Yeah,
genre,
I was gonna say
but
the only ones that like the what's the word? The trope that seems to work the best for this is the tension is not based around the problems that are happening in front. It's that the premise, like this is a common trope, is that the premise of the romance is a lie, and then the characters actually, the character perpetuating the lie actually falls in love, and it's a matter, and then like when the lie is exposed, it's a matter of convincing the other person that that it started as a lie but the romance was real, right? Like this is your
yeah.
your classic kind of like um uh what am I thinking? You know what I'm talking about, right? Like there's like
Yeah. Or the other opposite of that is enemies to lovers, right? Which is
yeah.
another amazing trope for obvious sort of reasons, but that's kind of that effect, I guess I would say, sort of in reverse, right? I would say the like romance based on a lie trope. We would maybe call this like 10 Things I Hate About You, like the archetypal. Actually, Aladdin is the archetypal example I could probably think of. That is sort of friends to like enemies in a way, right? Like the whole point is is kind of like the deception, but then there's also kind of the Beauty and the Beast story, right? Like this is enemies to lovers. You have two people who start off at sort of crossed whatever, but they have chemistry even though they hate each other, and eventually they kind of surrender into it. I'm actually Those are different sort of archetypes of stories than the story that we're getting here, which is much more relatable, in fact, to the Titanics and Pitch Perfects of the world. But Titanic and Pitch Perfect both have different sorts of main different sorts of protagonists who are fighting different sorts of bad guys. Like in Pitch Perfect, Anna Kendrick's character is, not that she's like damaged, but she has a real thing that she needs to overcome. She doesn't want to work with a team. She is sort of driven to this kind of fault, and she is tossing away sort of the help and camaraderie that she's sort of reluctantly finding. It's only when she can really reconcile with that and join up, become part of a team, right, that she's sort of able to work on that kind of level. And all of that gets expressed through her relationship with with the mailman character. I don't remember the actor, but his name in the movie is Jesse. And it's because, what happens in those movies is it's actually the male love interest who's pretty static and one-dimensional. Jack and Jesse, Jack in Titanic and Jesse in Pitch Perfect, they are actually pretty perfect boyfriends in a way, right? They're empathetic, emotionally attentive, all of the rest of them, right? But the kind of help that they offer to the female character isn't always what they're looking for, or it's not what they're looking for at first. And part of their character arc is really reconciling, but they reconcile it through the romance, and that's what makes it so great. But anyway, this is the opposite of that, right? They're both empty and boring. There's really not a lot going on.
Well, I mean,
There's this minor character arc around going, like, learning to accept the magic of Christmas. But
well,
yeah.
I think like it is trying to be that, right? Because like the ostensible arc is she is is that she is emotionally unavailable since her husband died from cancer, right? Like, and ostensibly Jack Snowman rather teaches her how to love again, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. Learning to love again. They do. That's fair. They do have that conversation. Yeah.
but
Okay.
like it's not done well, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah. Yeah.
seeing,
Yeah. Yeah.
this middle schooler, teaches her, says to her, but you're nice and you deserve to be loved, right? And she's like,
I
you
hate
know
that.
what?
Yeah.
You're right, I do, right? Like, and that's like the substance of it, right? Like,
Honestly, this is like funnily enough, I had meant to talk about this in the back half because it has been irking me specifically because of Dragon Age Inquisition. Or I'm sorry, Dragon Age Veilguard.
Guard.
But I guess a little bit of foreshadowing is that I really sort of hate the kind of like therapization of sort of like mainstream storytelling in a way. The fact that she is self-aware enough to say, I don't think I can love myself and I need to learn how to love myself before I can love anybody else. I hate that. I hate that so much. And I feel like I recently have been hit by it in like 4 different places and I just am kind of waving the flag and going, "You know what? This is kind of a fucking problem. I sort of hate this," right? Like, if people are too self-aware on this like therapy kind of like level, right? It kills dramatic tension and it kills just drama in these stories. And like, it's not always it, but it's like it's just it's I feel like it's going to be my new thing, like MCU humor. You know what I mean? That it's just like I'm gonna see it everywhere. It's gonna fucking drive me insane.
Buddy,
Oh
I
no!
have very bad news for you about
Oh
Veilguard.
no! Oh no! I know. I've seen it a little bit in Veilguard. And it's not even like I like Veilguard just fine. I like Veilguard just fine. But just like, uh, it's just like the speed with which characters forgive each other fucks me up because like that never happens. That is only happening because of this therapization problem. Anyway, I don't know. We can talk more about it. I I don't want to derail entirely out of Hot Frosty.
All right, let's just finish up about Hot Frosty. Then what other things do you want to talk about with Hot Frost?
Yeah, oh man, I don't even know. What do I want to talk about? The low budgetness of it is real, and I appreciated it quite a lot. The snow is very fake in this movie because I am pretty sure they filmed it in Atlanta with fake snow machines.
It's a suburb. It's a suburb of Ontario.
Oh, real Canada?
Yeah.
You're kidding me.
It's either Ontario. Yeah. No. It's you can if you search for it. It's like town outside of Ontario has hot frosty fever where it was filmed. Right. Like.
Wow.
Yeah.
They must have like filmed it in the summer or something. The snow is all so fake. And I understand why in a way, especially because Hot Frosty himself is constantly interacting with it. And like if he did that, it would be, what I mean? Like
hurt,
if he was
right?
running, yeah, exactly. There's this part where he goes outside, he picks up a bunch of the snow and he rubs it all over his chest. If I were to do that, first of all, the way that snow is not dust. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not like sawdust, which is what it looks like in kind of the movie. And it also fucking melts, right? Like if he rubbed his chest with snow, it wouldn't just fall into his overalls. It would leave behind the glistening of water as it melts his chest. But maybe you know what? Maybe I'm not giving enough credit because the metaphysics of the whole thing and fucking Hot Frosty has a body temperature of like 32 degrees or some shit. You know what I mean? It's like
no, I would say like it is appropriate for the lore, but you are correct, right? Like and like they show I don't know if you watched like all these movies do like post credits bloopers, and like one of the big ones is Craig Robinson playing the piano and like singing a song with Joe Trulio, and the camera pans out and it shows the crew and the fake snow machine, right? Like blowing snow on them. Fun facts. Apparently one of my brother's friends was the second unit director for this film, and also second unit DP for this film, and was the DP for the Ryan Reynolds Aviation Gin commercial that is a direct parody of Hot Frosty. You should go look that up after this. It's like a short little dumb thing, but like it is
Okay.
clearly a direct parody of Hot Frosty. But yeah, no, it's. Did you have any point besides that about like the snow being fake?
No, I mean, I don't know. What else do I don't have anything. What else do you have to say about it?
I don't know if I have anything else. Like I said, it's fun if you want to watch like so the way I got introduced to this style of movie is like, the family sitting around, they don't want to watch anything too serious, right? Like they just want to watch something vaguely seasonal that you don't have to worry about, and no one felt like watching one of the classics, like A Christmas Story or something. You can throw one of these on. It doesn't matter if you don't pay too close attention because it's stupid, right? The one last year I watched with my fiance's family was Love Hard. I can't even remember the name of it. There was a Ryan Reynolds Netflix film that was about Christmas. That was like a Christmas Carol style film. All kind of dumb. Although I think the Ryan Reynolds, I remember being slightly better, like slightly like acceptable, just like entirely forgettable. And so if you just want something to kind of like be cozy with, I guess it's fine, right? Like I said, this one's fun because it's like absurd, but like The Merry Gentleman, fine. If like, if I had a Christmas party and I wanted something to put on in the background, these movies would be perfect for that. Right, like any of these, right? Like you don't have to worry about like, you don't have to worry about getting drawn into the plot because it's nonsense, right? Like it's like nothing, right? So, that is probably my last word on this. Do you have anything else before we move on to our weeks?
No, sure, yeah.
All right, so buddy, how was your week? How was
Well, okay, so alluded to, I played a little bit of, I guess, Dragon Age. My thing says 8 hours. I feel like I'm barely through the tutorial, to be honest. I'm like level 7 or something. I am enjoying it quite a lot more since swapping to Mage. I think I would have had a pretty bad time if I'd stuck on Warrior, to be honest with you, just on that like raw flavor. I am learning so much about my own weird sort of kind of like obsession with certain flavor stuff. So just being a mage who has this little dagger orb combo. Wait, you played a warrior. Do you know about this? Do you know about how mages play?
Yeah, no, I watched the previews because I was considering going mage. Because I like the spellblade archetype, but
the dagger orb combo I find very dynamic and fun. I'm pretty into it. It is, it's pretty different from my kind of like typical playthroughs. I almost always am going through as this kind of DPS warrior, and I'm just going super hard on kind of the sort of like auto attacks or whatever in these kinds of games. But I actually am enjoying the system quite a lot. I was pretty mad at first until we got to detonations, which is pretty far into this whole process, right? Where you can apply a status effect and then somebody else can detonate the status effect. This is the gameplay that I love. It came in Mass Effect 2 and has sort of defined the BioWare formula ever since then, right? You have primers and detonators across your characters. It was in Anthem, it was in Andromeda, it was in just a bunch of different BioWare games, basically. And so once we got into priming and detonating, I was into it. But I'm also playing on not hard, but the one before, like super hard, like Nightmare or whatever. So there's normal, I'm one tick up, which is a recommendation from Lou in the chat, said that I should play it.
That is also what I'm playing on.
Okay, yeah. It is harder than I expected, to be honest with you. I find myself getting owned by kind of mobs more. I think part of it is that it is doing a little bit of the Dark Souls rules in the sense of the enemies are chunking for just a lot of health, and you have to really time things right in order to be sort of right. And there's a little bit of stuff in here that's like kind of unintuitive. Like there are parries that I feel like I ought to have hit, but I am missing, and it's because you can only parry. It seems like, I don't know if this is the case, but it seems like you only parry from the front. Something has to be in front of you in order for your parry to connect. So if it hits you like on the shoulder, on the side, and even if you time your parry right, you will still fuck it up, right? And especially if you do that in the back, it's right. But I really like the snappiness of the dodging. which is really great. The mage gets a special blink dodge, which is actually a lot of fun. And I've been doing, a lot of stuff with that. So on kind of a raw combat level, mechanics level, we're cruising. I'm into it. I like Dragon Age Veilguard. On a story level, I'm really chugging. It's hard. I like a lot of the bones. The idea. I'm actually quite glad that Solus is not straight up the villain. This is spoilers for like fucking the tutorial, so it's not. I'm not going to consider this sort of real spoilers. Solus was billed as the villain in Dragon Age Veilguard. It was originally called Dragon Age Dreadwolf, right? Solus is the Dreadwolf, this ancient elven sort of like god who led a rebellion and imprisoned the other elves. We learned all this in Inquisition, right? In Veilguard, Solus is doing some villain shit, but like you interrupt his villain shit right up front, and then he gets imprisoned essentially in like a magical counter dimension that only you have access to. And so he actually kind of becomes like a little friendly rival thing. And this part of the story that I'm connected to the most because it actually has what I'm looking for. This kind of like character drama and tension, right? Solus is mad that you fucked up his little ritual, and he's kind of spiteful and mean about it, but he's also like fundamentally an altruistic person. He's not a villain out of selfishness, right? He is trying to heal the world from whatever, and all this stuff with Gillenane and Algernon, whatever yeah. But all of the interior character interactions I'm really hating. The party is no fun. And and it's just down to this therapy, it's just down to this fucking therapy speak that is like destroying me. No one can ever have conflict. All conflicts immediately resolve. Everybody apologizes. Everybody is able and perfectly willing to see things from one another's perspectives. Nobody ever calls anybody else out. You know what I mean? Even in things that seem like they are building towards, even like I feels like things are building towards a head. Harding gets hurt to end. Everyone keeps going, you know what, Harding, you're hurt. And it seems like she's getting more and more frustrated, right? But then, and I don't even know if this is supposed to be the resolution. Somebody just, she just kind of went, you're not keeping me out of this one. And somebody goes, I think it's my character went, I'm not trying to exclude you, or I think you're a part of the team or something like that, right? And I'm happy, it's like, this stuff kills me. It's like the stuff that they're going for, right? This Mass Effect 2, right? This Mass Effect 2 storytelling. They did this 15 years ago, and they did it great. But my favorite game of all time, right? But the thing that made Mass Effect 2 work so well was everybody was fighting all the time. Miranda hates Jack. Tali and Legion, you are constantly brokering these little pieces. Grunt and Morden, you're brokering these pieces between people all the time because you're putting together the ragtag group. Everybody has a different personality. They are all conflicting. They all have different motivations and backgrounds. Just all of the rest of it. This is a team that is too cohesive to be interesting. And so I am just constantly frustrated by this level of character. I don't know, just this level of character drama. And it's the same problem that I've outlined before in WoW, actually, because it happened, it happened in WoW right? Everybody is getting kind of these hug boxy. That's kind of a fucked up term. It's just like very affirmation therapy ish stuff, right? Where as soon as someone expresses disagreement, everybody sits down in a little fucking circle, okay, and has their therapy session over it. And I think that's okay from time to time. And I specifically think it's okay for certain characters. For instance, if you were to tell me that Anduin's mode of conflict resolution is to be very forgiving and empathetic, okay, I get that, right? But it's that everybody is behaving on this way. And that is bad and wrong, and I hate it. And it's driving me fucking nuts. So there we go.
Lou says, well, it's not going to get any better. I can confirm. My playtime is 73 hours, although it's inflated a little bit because I left it on while I was doing some other stuff at a couple times. So it's probably like 48 hours too much, but it's still definitely above 60 hours. There's not a lot of inter-party conflict. And the therapy thing, like a lot of the character quests are like resolving problems with like, you know, resolving personal problems that the characters have. And I mean like resolving their internal kind of like Rook plays therapist for all the members of his party, and
So I am okay with that. So
Okay.
I do want to clarify. I am okay with that. I am okay with that. Right. That's what Mass Effect 2 is also like. Right. You know, you have to do the loyalty. This is what the loyalty missions are. Shepard goes and, you know, saves Miranda's sister from their dad. Right. You know, Shepard, what does he do with some of these other ones? Right. Like Tali, you know, Shepard goes to this place with the Quarian, you know, like to rescue these Quarians that Tali feels guilty for, right? Even like characters who aren't super drama filled, like, you know, whatever, like Miranda or Jack or whatever, get stuff like this. With Kasumi, you do one last job in order for her to put to bed, you know, her old thief partner who died, right? You know, you destroy the Blue Suns mercenary group thing for the one guy whose name I can't remember.
Garrus?
No, not Garrus. Oh, Garrus's one is so good. No, I'm talking about the guy with like the fucked up eye. Well, that could also be Garrus, but it's the human with the fucked up eye. Do you know what I'm talking about? And he has a Cockney accent. He's a DLC character.
Oh, it's like Zahid? Yeah, Zaid.
Yeah, Zaid. Yeah, Zaid. Yeah, Zaid's thing is he wants revenge on his former business partner who fucked him over, right? I'm fine with that on a me to them level, right? It is just that when I see a bunch of characters interacting and talking through the story, which is actually something that doesn't happen as much in Mass Effect 2 as I wanted it to, right? If there was a thing I would change about Mass Effect 2 is that I would bring more of those characters into these council room meetings because those are so dynamic and fun, right? And they're there in Veilguard. You like when you are going to a mission or before going to a mission or whatever, you have this little thing where they're sitting around the table, and I was like, oh, this is great. This is where you're going to get a bunch of differing perspectives. This is where people are going to, you know, fight it out. This is where you're going to get a bunch of disapproval with people and a bunch of approval people because they're having arguments and you're picking sides. And I don't know, it just hasn't materialized in the way to.
So I will say that like there is a lot of the good stuff there, right? Like there are missions that have like real goals that I think are good, but there are also missions that are like, you know, I have this particular mental block. Help me talk through it so that I can become a gooder, you know, I can become like a mentally resolved person.
Yeah. Okay.
There, and I find most of the characters fairly unlikable, which is part of the problem. Like you see,
I understand. I am not a Bellara enjoyer. I immediately got it, and I was like, ugh. I actually kind of wanted to like Bellara just on the level of like, I wanted to fight you about this stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, but I just like immediately, yeah.
Lou in the chat says there's so much banter in the VG that you can hear just by hanging around the lighthouse. That is true. There's some cool stuff there. And like when you have two people in the party, they will banter with each other about things, right? Like you have not met Davrin or Emmerich yet, but like they both have like minions, and there's a very obvious like fatherhood thing going on with both of them, and they like talk back and forth about that, and that can be kind of fun sometimes.
That's cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't love any of the ones I've met so far. Nev Harding, Bellara. I specifically don't like Bellara, but you know, like Nev and Harding are kind of fun. And I don't super care. I like Harding's thing with the lyrium stuff. Like Harding was like, I probably would have said I don't like Harding, but then this crazy shit with the fucking lyrium happened, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, right?
Oh, so
something kind of compelling that's going on.
The lore drops are actually very good. Like Lou last time we were here was talking in the chat about like crazy lore drops. I'm like, yes, there are crazy fucking lore drops. And obviously I'm not as well versed in it, but you like essentially you start uncovering some of Solus's memories, and that's as much as I'm gonna say.
Okay.
And there's some crazy stuff that happens out of those memories. There is, I think, I wouldn't necessarily call it a pacing issue. Like, so I also thought the beginning of the game was hard. I am past the point where it's like super hard, right? Like, I beat what I'm pretty sure is the final optional boss long before I needed to. Like, I unlocked it like 20 levels early. I thought I might have been able to do it, but it would just the health was so spongy that I didn't want to, and so I ended up beating it like 12ish levels early. But there was a basically killing it unlocked a codex entry that when I read it was like, I haven't experienced the thing that they said, back when we did this, right? It's like that hasn't happened yet. And that was like literally like like the next mission. Yeah, Lou says she finished that boss around level 28. It is just too spongy to do, I think, that on hard mode. I ended up doing it around level 38. But the game is not particularly hard, especially, and I think the combat started for me to feel much better once I unlocked a bunch of stuff and like things felt a little bit more fluid and I felt a little bit less locked up. Like it stopped comparing unfavorably to Ragnarok and God of War. It started comparing. I don't think it's as good as Ragnarok, but I think it's pretty good, all things considered. Yeah. Lou says she got a codex
entry about Emmerich before I ever met him.
Yeah. Okay. Which is weird because they do a lot. Like there are things that I find frustrating where they will like wall off parts of the world. Like when you're on a mission and walking through like certain cities, they will wall off parts of it. So you can't just like walk around. Like they're like, clearly you could go this way, but not until the mission's over and you've unlocked like the open world version of it, which I find personally frustrating. But they don't bother to do that with some of this other stuff. And like there is.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't unlocked. There's an open world part of these.
Well, places? It's not super open, but like you will get there eventually, right? Like you will go back to Arlathan, and you haven't gotten to Treviso and Minrathous yet, right?
Yeah, I just went to Minrathous. That's my last thing.
Yeah, so you will eventually be able to go back to Minrathous and kind of walk the streets freely and pick up side quests, and it won't be like say a Inquisition or a Skyrim, but it will be like you can kind of walk around the predefined paths and do things a little bit more openly.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I have actually been really liking that it's on rails. I want more on rails games like this, to be honest with you. This is something that I liked at the time in Inquisition, and I have liked it in other sorts of games, right? But we talked about this as kind of like the Ubisoft kind of problem or whatever. Like, playing Inquisition has actually felt great just on the level of I feel like I'm playing a D&D. Like I feel like I'm sorry, fucking Veilguard, whatever, Veilguard. I feel like I'm playing a D&D game. I feel like I'm playing an adventure path, right? And I just kind of like that there is a clear breadcrumb that takes me to the next point and I don't have any of this fucking fluff to deal with or whatever. Part of that is that like, it's not that I'm beating the game for the purpose of the podcast. I want to play this game, and all the rest of it, but I feel sort of an emphasis on playing it that is, I just like, I don't want to deal with side quest bullshit. Side quests are actually kind of fine. I don't want to deal with like side bullshit, right? Like I don't want to get hung up on the completion by picking up little whatever music notes that you have to do solve these little puzzles for. Like that kind of shit would absolutely have bogged me down if this was an open. And it's been nice that just every mission just boop, next one, kind of all the way all the way down the line. Everything but POIs, points of interest.
Yeah, there
are quests. Okay.
Yeah, there are like things to pick up, right? Like there are like like chests and mementos and whatnot.
Yeah.
But they're not like super duper necessary. And also like the thing that happens with this style of game is like it's like walk down the path and it's like here's the marker for where you go. Like there's a fork, you can go left or right and the marker's on the right side, so you just go to the left side, right? Like you always like work against the marker until you can't anymore and then you walk down the marker.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, other than that, I'm definitely sort of enjoying it. We'll see how it kind of goes. Honestly, all I really want to be doing is playing the Omens of Destruction is the next DLC. The trailer dropped. Pretty cool. I'm a little obsessed with Uzul Skulltaker. Okay. This is actually an okay question. 40K like that, right?
I know some 40K lore. Yeah. I'm not like an
What
expert.
should my first 40K thing? Whatever. Moving to New Hampshire. I won't shut up about the Scarlet. That's true. Sarian, friend of the podcast, Sarian, super into 40K. I'm sure we will end up figuring out some way to kind of like play it as like a group or whatever. And I was really thinking about it because like I am super connected to Warhammer Fantasy. I love Warhammer Fantasy. I could tell you so many details about all those factions, but I'm not super connected to 40K. Right? People have told me that I would like Tau because they are the closest to Wood Elves. Tau are sort of 40K version of Wood Elves, on kind of a ludic sense is my understanding. But yeah, I don't know. Like if you were to do a 40K, are you doing any 40K for Sarian or those guys?
I haven't. Mark, friend of the podcast, keeps trying to get me into it, and I have like
Oh my
an
god, we're gonna make a two front war. Okay.
well, I mean, hey, like Mark, I believe either this weekend or last weekend was at like the Vegas Open. That's like a thing that my friends on the West Coast that play 40K do. And it'd be great for you and Sarah to also go at some point because they keep what
I think Sarian is going actually.
Okay. I have a box of orcs that I have yet to put together and paint, but that's just that's me like dragging my feet on everything. If you ask me what army should you get, I would say something stupid like the Americans during the American Revolution because I've been playing historical miniatures, but
is this where you put Napoleon against George Washington against
no
Robert
so
E.
so
Lee?
the historical miniatures are like that's not the right thing, right? Like this is like the last game I played, the guy who ran the game set up the Battle of Saratoga, and I was playing General Nixon under I forget the other two generals, and versus the British, and it's you just run the battle and the historical, and you just see if you can change history type of deal, right? Kind of like Crusader Kings. It's a very different style of play. I would not, that was more of a joke than anything else. But
okay.
What kind of aesthetics are you looking for?
That does make sense because I know these history guys, are so insane about their history. No one would ever. Everybody would be like, "Well, obviously Robert E. Lee would win because mass-produced rifles were a standard in 1865, but George Washington didn't have, like that kind of thing."
Yeah,
right?
no, and maybe you could do different scenarios, in alternate scenarios, but inside of the same war, right?
You could do alternate versions of. I don't know, like Waterloo or something, but under different circumstances. Yeah. Austerlitz, right?
Yeah. What kind of aesthetic are you looking for?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know because I know on a vague level about sort of 40K, but the stuff that I kind of connect to most in fantasy feels like it isn't represented well. Their League of Votan is, I guess, technically represented now. So I theoretically could do space dwarves, or dwarfs, I guess technically would be how you pronounce it, right? The Tower, the Wood Elves, right? The
Tau have a slightly different feel to them, is my understanding. They are space communists with mind control or something like that.
Yeah, so the thing that people told me made them feel like Wood Elves is they're very pew-pew, which is how people describe Wood Elves, in the sense that they're a very ranged focused army, with heavy cavalry, actually light cavalry technically, like swift skirmishy kind of cavalry. Everybody fucking hates playing the Wood Elves in the tabletop for Warhammer Fantasy or playing against the Wood Elves because all they do is kite you. And they cut you into trees. They can fire through trees with line of sight. They have these cavalry that just are super fast and can run circles around your whole army, pick off your most important all the time. They have access to some really powerful lores of magic, that kind of stuff, right? And I think that it plays similarly because I know the Tau, for instance, they're the base Tau troopers, but they also have a kind of cavalry unit that is just Wild Riders that just are behaves exactly like Wild Riders because the Tau are they're this kind of commune of a bunch of different races all kind of cobbled together sort of thing. So yeah.
So are you looking for that kind of like because I think there's like a motorcycle chapter.
Oh, of Space Marines. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking about Space Marines. I was thinking about, is it the Blood Angels?
I mean, so so the space. There's like 72 different types of Space Marine, right? Like
Yeah.
my understanding is that you don't play the Space Marines. You play like whatever chapter of this. You know, like whatever. You know, is chapter the right word?
Yeah, because there's like the Ultramarines are a chapter, the Blood Angels are a
Yeah.
chapter, the Sanguine Host is a chapter, right? Like these are the famous ones, but
Yeah. Like I'm thinking like Space Wolves, but I'm thinking there there is, I believe, a Space Marine chapter that is a Traitor Legion. It's Legion. That's the word I'm looking for. There's a Traitor Legion that is like only kind of sort of technically a Traitor Legion, but isn't like really a Traitor Legion. But also, almost all of my 40k lore is based off of 1D4chan, which is like not exactly the most reliable source. So
yeah.
I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, part of me is thinking that I should play I should just play Corn, because you know the constant between fantasy and 40k are the demons, right? And I could just play something Corn related, because Corn is obviously my favorite chaos god. So maybe I could, you know, Scarbrand is one of, there's Scarbrand, there's like Calabundi or something like that, or Kabundi is another bloodthirster lord for 40k. And then, you know, and then Uzul Skulltaker is this guy. He has a cloak of skulls, which I think is sweet as fuck. So I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like I said, I don't know enough about like the mechanics to really like I was drawn to orcs because of orc theming. Like the chapters I have considered playing are um Noise Marines, which are like the Slanesh chapter, orcs, and whatever chapter Rogel Dorn is part of, just because I think he's funny, or at least the Emperor. If the Emperor had a text-to-speech device, which was a series that got BTFO'd by Games Workshop enforcing copyright. Rogel Dorn was funny in that, but like that's like my all of my understanding of 40k is based on memes. So you know that's basically it. Like you,
well, listen, I certainly understand more DACA. Okay.
did you like the Crypt Lords? Because like the Necrons are, I think, like the Crypt Lords.
Necrons are like the Tomb Kings, you mean?
That's what I meant.
Yeah. The thing about Necrons is that I'm pretty sure Sarian is, right? Isn't that what he plays?
I don't know.
Does that mean you can't play them? Like the Eldar. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, part of me thinks I would like the Eldar just because they're fucking Protoss from StarCraft, which is sweet. And I feel like I also would like the Tyranids, but I also feel like that's a bitch answer in a way. Like everybody fucking likes the Tyranids. Come on, you think harder, right? Like I feel like if I were to actually do something it would be like Gene Stealer cult or something like that.
Yeah. No, I mean I don't. Like I don't know enough to give you a better answer to that. I would recommend talking to Sarian or Mark or have you ever met Chris Kummel?
I know of Chris. He's your D&D friend.
Yeah, he's the guy that
I actually have talked. Yeah.
Yeah. He plays Nids, I think. I believe he was at the Open with Mark. So those are the people I would ask deeper questions of, because you know, every time, like I bought a bottle of orcs, or a box of orcs. I also bought a box of like Steam Forge games, like what's the name of the Steam Forge games mini game? War Machine, because I was like that looks cool.
Oh, I have a friend who used to work for War Machine.
I think Steam Forge bought War Machine at some point. Miniature games, just because like they have a pirate faction that I think looks awesome. But like, you know, the chance of me actually playing any of this is low. So, but maybe I will someday. Maybe I'll get around to actually painting my miniatures.
Yeah, sure.
My 10,000 miniatures. On my side, the other thing I have been playing is Deadlock and Supervive. Supervive is a newish game. It's a like a battle royale MOBA style game. Friend of the cast, Monic, pointed it out to me, and the thing I've been enjoying about it is it's got like the snappiness of a BR. Like rounds are like 15 to 20 minutes at most. and you're usually shorter than that. Combined with kind of like the team fighty things I find fun about MOBAs. Um, Lou says Super 5 looks pretty fun. If you ever want to play, let me know. Friend of the cast, Monica, has been playing with me. And it doesn't have like, Deadlock I love, but like, so last night, Monica and I played a handful of rounds of Super 5, and then we played 2 games of Deadlock, and the second game of Deadlock just kept dragging on. It was like, by the end of it, it was like, I don't care if we win or lose, I just want it to end, right? Like, and that's just how MOBAs go sometimes, right? Like, you wave back and forth. But I'm still enjoying both of them. I mean, Deadlock, I am definitely getting to the point where I'm starting to like run into like the toxic frust that like define the league experience.
Yeah.
And I would love to play with other people, but it's also kind of like I am good enough that I'm playing in games with people that are good enough to like be bad about things. And so, there's that. So, but it's still a fun game. What else? Been watching through the Bad Batch, season 1. Very fun. I like it better than the Clone Wars. But like I said, nothing. Have you watched any Clone Wars since we talked about it?
I have started watching Clone Wars. I've watched just like a handful of episodes.
Okay.
But I have started
didn't-
watching.
Did you look up the watch order? I should have told you about this.
No.
Okay, so the order on Disney Plus, is not the right order. Like you will watch episodes that come like in the wrong order
That actually explains so much. That explains so much. I thought it was intended. I thought it was
it is arguable that it was intended in the first, like once you get like to the 4th season, everything's pretty linear, but like it is arguable that it was intended in the first place. But like there's a list. I will find it. I mean, I'm sure you could find it by just Googling Clone Wars watch order, but yeah, the chronological episode order, it puts things in order, and it's like once you hit like I said, like season 4, it's just kind of in order. But like the first episode you're supposed to watch is season 2, episode 16.
Okay. The first episode is season 2, episode 16?
Yeah.
Wild. Okay.
Yeah, and there's the Clone Wars movie, which I have not watched, but that's like the third thing you're supposed to watch.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Ooh, excuse me.
But there will also be moments where you'll be watching like even past this, where you'll be watching like the intro, like the voiceover part, and it'll be like, was there an episode about this? And there won't be, right? Like there'll be like missing people, but like there are some that like if you had watched it in the chronological order, you will have seen some of the things beforehand. But yeah, once you get towards that last season, let me know, because I will rewatch the last 4 episodes, because it is very, very good. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, man, like like I said, I watched Gladiator 2, but we won't talk about that until later. I listened to the totally coincidentally, I listening to Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and I finished that, but I didn't really absorb it, so I think I have to go back and listen to it again on tape.
Is this because of Gladiator?
No, it's total coincidence, right? Funnily enough, part of the reason was last year I watched The Holdovers, which I think is an excellent. I don't know if it would fit your definition of a Christmas movie, but I think it is an excellent Christmas movie. And the professor character, Paul Giamatti's character in that, recommends the Meditations to like all of his students. And so I was thinking about that. I was like, yeah, I should read these. And so I listened to it once, but it kind of like some of it went in one ear and out the other. So I need to go through it again. I've been listening to, it's called, I think it's either Overthrow or To Overthrow: The Rise and Fall and Rise of Communism by Sean McMeekin, I think is his name.
Okay.
Which has been interesting. But the start of that book starts out with like a thing about Francis Fukuyama's End of History, which Yeah, and like I have heard, like
Have you read that book?
I have not. This
It's
I need to put it on the
it's
list.
it's good. I read it out of you know, it's probably a turning point of my like political thinking, to be honest with you. I read it expecting to hate it because it's clowned on,
Yeah,
like
that's the thing. Is like everybody is like, oh, Francis Fukuyama was wrong about the end of history, and I've also heard like, well, that's not actually the point of the book. But I don't know.
yeah, it's not. It's incredible. It's incredible how missing the point it is. It is like the true version of like someone misinterpreting a headline and then tweeting about it and getting like dunked in the replies or whatever. That's like what everyone is doing when they're all laughing at Francis Fukuyama titling his book The End of History. He explains in a lot of detail why it is called The End of History and what his sort of thesis is. And I disagree with some like aspects of that, but it's wild how correct he was about like the state of the world. And this is 30 years ago, right? It's before the internet, like in the form that we see it, before iPhone, like, but like he is right about so much stuff that it is like, oh, all of you are fucking morons for pretending that this book is not actually really, really like good. If somebody told me here is a book that is, like not an amazing amount, maybe like 80% right, 20% kind of fluff, and it does a remarkable job at kind of predicting what, sort of the, what do I call it? Maybe like the political pillars of this era of the world, like is like, obviously we would all say that's like a really fucking like good book. So it was wild to me. Yeah. Anyway, crazy, great book.
Yeah, no, that's on the list. And then also just on this is also Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, which like, is like gets referenced all the time. Yeah. I suspect I will disagree with some of it. Just because I think a lot of people today, like a lot of like the talking head types today, discount the viability of online communities in a way. But I think there is also something there. So I want to read it to know how much I agree and disagree with it.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, listen, I've been listening to an audiobook actually called Pax, which is about it's kind of about like the golden era. This is the 2nd century AD. This golden era of Roman civilization, which is the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, like the Gibson book from the 1700s.
I've not read it.
Okay, so it's actually kind of wild. That book is it's actually like it's a bazillion books. It's like 6 books or something. It's a bunch of volumes, right? But it is this guy named Edward Gibson who is, to his mind, charting out the decline and fall, right, of the Roman Empire, explaining why the Roman Empire fell. And it's actually where you get a lot of the dumb reasons that people think the Roman Empire kind of collapsed. So for instance, like, one that you'll hear is sort of an overindulgence in like decadence and stuff like that. Like the idea, this is like it's like the Joe Rogan argument for why the
Ross Douthat, I think, wrote a book called like the Decadent Society or something like that, right? Like
Yeah, and the idea is just that like Rome kind of got fat and lazy and then kind of got preyed upon by these incredibly martial, hard living sort of like civilizations, but the historical record doesn't really bear that out because it's mostly about narrativization. The way it was put in a video essay that I watched was pretty funny, where it basically said the reason this has picked up steam is because savage barbarian tribe brings an entire empire to heel is a really compelling story, and the biggest, most powerful empire on earth squashes another savage tribe is not, right? So what happens is historians love to tell the stories of like the Visigoths sacking Rome or whatever, right? But nobody tells the story of all of the Germanic tribes that are brutally put down by Roman legions for like decade after decade, right? And also just like stuff with timescale. People don't, there are actions that happen in the 2nd century that are attributed to like the fall of Rome in the 5th century without people really understanding the true scale of time. Like 300 years is a titanic amount of time, right? It would be like saying, it would be like saying that there is some catastrophe or collapse in American society that is not even due to the Constitution, that's due to like the Mayflower Compact. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, that's like a ludicrous fucking thing, right? Which is obviously weird because of the way that our society has advanced so far in the same amount of time. Obviously the Romans didn't really like advance technologically in all that amount of time, but like people who were making decisions in the 6th century were really honestly not thinking all that much about the decisions that century kind of and it really was more kind of like and stuff like that. But anyway, so Edward Gibson writes this whole book, Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. It's not great, but it was in the 1700s. It's kind of like one of the first like true kind of modern histories in a lot of senses, very famous or whatever. In it, he actually says that the 2nd century AD is the world at its best, that it is the world where it has maximized sort of a version. Obviously slavery was still legal when Gibson was writing this, a version of freedom and prosperity, and basically saying, Rome controlled X amount of the world's population. Most of these citizens were living in relative sort of freedom and peace, and they were living fairly prosperous lives. Therefore this is the best period, and Pax is kind of taking a modern look at that period and analyzing that, right? And it has started by breaking down the emperorship of Nero, who I have known about in like an oblique sense, but I've never actually like heard the story of Nero, and specifically Nero's downfall, which is pretty interesting, kind of like told, I guess, to me. And so that I don't know, the show was interesting.
Buddy, how often do you
and
think
wild.
about Rome?
More than you might think. The reason I'm listening to it is for D&D purposes.
Okay.
Right? Obviously, my D&D setting, my D&D setting surrounds based on the idea that there is a kind of great empire, right, with different provinces that all have different sort of like cultures and flavors and stuff like that. And I like, in my mind, I am setting my D&D games in a Roman kind of setting, in the sense that there is a Pax, right? I mean, it would be whatever, Pax Serrania or whatever, but like, there is a powerful kind of all-encompassing empire, that there are barbarians at the gates, right, who are doing sort of things. But this is not built to be like a medieval story about small individual castles and knights and kings and nobles or whatever, even though some of that. It is really built to be kind of a story about an empire that is in its kind of like glory period, right? So yeah.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's most of everything I've done in the week. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
Not particularly. I drifted. Did you know about? Did I talk about this in the podcast?
You didn't talk about it on the podcast, but you talked about it during Raid. So go for it.
That's true. Yeah. Because we haven't done. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We don't stuff, but it was fun. I did drift, and I kind of want to get obsessed with drifting. Even though I did barf, it was pretty embarrassing. They don't tell you that when people are making these whipping turns it's just like does hell on your stomach. And the other thing is that when you spin out, right, you are pumping a ton of exhaust, and then you are turning yourself right into that exhaust. So I was just like breathing in a ton of fucking fumes that were just like making me incredibly queasy, and I ended up barfing, which is so embarrassing. But also the class was built for much more advanced drivers than me, which made it feel all the more worth it. It was a great time. Highly recommend. Everybody should go do Drift 101 as yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely feel that. For Zhao's friend of the cast, Zhao's bachelor party, we did go-karts, and like I couldn't handle that. Like that was like I was like nauseous doing it for some. Like I'm not having fun with doing this, and so I stopped. Right, like but it is it's like that level of kind of like acceleration just doesn't agree with me. But so I definitely feel your your pain there, I guess. Maybe not the exhaust part, but I get that. Yeah. Well, very cool. Anything else that you want to talk about before we got out of here?
I guess not.
All right. With that, I'm going to say, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at derpsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsplaygames.com. You can follow us at twitch.tv/derpsplaygames or youtube.com/@derpsplaygames where these go out live. Rate and review us on iTunes. All the links are down in the description. Buddy, do you have anything else you're looking to promote?
Man, maybe for the first time, I kind of don't. Yeah, I guess not.
All right. Well, with that, I will say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.